My name is Matt Cowell. I'm the CEO at QuantHub, and love seeing so many people join the conversation today. We're certainly passionate about data literacy, and it's great to see so many of you joining and to talk about data literacy. It's definitely a topic near and dear to our hearts at QuantHub, and certainly to Ben as well. I've been CEO at QuantHub for 3 years. We're an early stage company, and we basically are an upskilling platform around all things data. So all data skills from kind of early data literacy all the way through to advanced analytics. And so happy to be joined today by Ben Jones. Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Ben Jones. I am the CEO of dataliteracy.com. And so we are on a mission to help people speak the language of data, training, assessments, educational materials. And that's what we do. So we get to work with organizations around the world that are trying to overcome some of the hurdles and barriers that we're all facing, as well as individuals that are looking to grow their skills and, begin to get over data phobia perhaps, or go from good to great. So that's what we do. And we're really, as Matt mentioned, really excited about the partnership we announced this week. And this isn't really a PR conversation, but what was great about that for us was now we can have different learners with different styles start to benefit from some of the content we put together. So that's what I do. When I'm not doing that, I'm hiking or kayaking or trying to enjoy stuff.
Living in the beautiful Northwest, I know.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm in the southeast, sweating because of all the humidity here. So
you get the humidity, we get the rain. We have humidity; it just comes to the ground. So
that's right.
Yours stays in the air.
Yeah, that's right. So let's start at the very beginning a little bit, and I know the intent. You and I were talking offline a little bit, in that in this day and age, it's becoming less and less about making the case for data literacy, and more to a degree about where in the world do we start. But I think for people listening, and not all companies are there yet, right? And so, what do you see out there when you're working with, or you're being approached by a new potential customer? What are you seeing in that sort of evolution for companies to start realizing there's a problem and then getting into where they're going to do about it? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so we've been lucky to work with organizations or individuals in those organizations that realize this is an important need. Sometimes they have to convince others within the organization. We see some people at step one and they're just trying to figure out where they get started. We see others that have been on the journey and are, crafting a very elaborate journey for their employees, and multifaceted and very mature. So we see everyone along that spectrum. And what I'm seeing, though, is they're all mostly trying to figure out how to make this very complex question, how do we help people grow their knowledge and skills, and they're trying to figure out a way to make that personal, figure out a way to make that fit and flow into what they do. And so those are some common threads. We often hear that they are curious about how they're doing today and how do they even answer that question. So there's a need to define some kind of a baseline perhaps, and to track progress. So those are some of the things we see out of the gate.
Yeah. Who are you seeing inside of organizations that are, sort of the champions, if you will, for this? Are you seeing any trends? Because there's not like a data literacy czar
right.
Quite yet, anyway, inside of organizations. So who's championing this?
Yeah, we actually are starting to see some individuals with even that title, the data literacy owner of some type. And so, but most likely it's going to be someone on the analytics team that we're talking to, or perhaps someone in HR and in learning and development within an organization that has been tasked, with trying to figure out, mostly because I think our primary offering is assessments and training. And so that would be our natural point of contact. But sometimes the owner is clear and they're very well placed and influential. Other times less the case. And I remember when I was involved with Lean Sigma a decade ago maybe, this is the same question. Who's the owner? Who's the champion? Mm-hmm. So we definitely see organizations trying to answer that question. They're doing it in various ways. Mostly I see it was probably underneath the office of the CDO. would be probably the most common place where we see owners residing. How about you? How about your team, and what are they saying as far as ownership of an initiative, right, within a company?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen it in the data ranks and in IT. We've seen those people being the champions, but one of our biggest customers is Southern Company out of the Southeast. Is a big energy utility, and they, even though it's come through IT.
Yep.
Over 75% of the participants are actually not in IT.
Right.
And so, but yeah, even though it's been championed by IT, we've seen that. But we have other customers where it's gone through L&D, Blue Cross Blue Shield. I know I've seen Lori and I think Lisa are on here today, and Blue Cross Blue Shield in North Carolina. That's through really more of kind of a learning and development function where it's part of their core values, which I love to see that. So that obviously comes all the way from the top. And that it's really part of the core values of the organization. So we're definitely seeing it permeate throughout the entire organization, but not always, right? Sometimes we'll see there's this kind of pocket over here where there's a person that's passionate about it, but it's not made it all the way through the organization quite yet.
Yeah, that reminds me of really. I would say strong advocates of data literacy, like Wendy Small. She's down in, I believe it's New Zealand, or actually I think it's Australia. And she grabbed the flag, within her organization and started making the case for it, started to build slowly influence and ability to kind of move the needle with that. So sometimes you see that, right? An individual that's so passionate about it that they're going to make things happen. And so absolutely. I think it's helpful to have individuals like that, that are helping things happen on the inside. I mean, that's important. Anytime you want to make a change to go from one place to another, especially when you're talking about something as massive as an organization with its own culture, its own processes and tools, someone's got to help champion that change. So we're lucky to have been able to partner with those individuals. So
So when before an organization, so for people listening to this today, and they're in an organization and maybe they're not talking about data literacy yet, at least not across the organization.
Right.
What are the problems and maybe some of the traps that and I know you've written a book on this topic, what are some of the traps that people fall into, when using data that actually have a lot to do with the data literacy skills of the organization, but they may not have connected those dots yet, right? They're struggling to use their data. They're struggling to be effective and get true insights out of the data. What are some of those traps you're seeing just kind of broadly that, may actually be caused by data literacy, a lack of data literacy skill, if you will?
Yeah. So, there's a few things maybe I see, or at least have been aware of. Things like, I would say there's a trap some organizations fall into where they go and hire some really amazing data talent, but they haven't figured out how to link data to their core purpose, perhaps, or at least it's not linked as strong as it should be. And also their processes are pretty rigid, so these really talented people are brought on board and they find that they're just working in pet projects and, not able to really contribute in a meaningful way. So that's kind of the problem when you put the talent question first without understanding and addressing some of the process challenges. You can give the most talented, intelligent, capable people in the world the most expensive and powerful tools. Right. But if you don't allow them and enable them to work on the most important questions and problems the organization is facing, you're going to get stalled and they're going to leave. They're going to be unhappy and they're going to leave. We actually see a problem when people start with training. I mean, if that's really your starting point, you already should be at a pretty mature place. At least if you're trying to roll out broad training, do you have access to data? I mean, if people are able to learn a lot, but not actually connect to the data sources they need to connect to, which is a common barrier that we hear from employees, especially when we do our team-based assessments called the data literacy score. That's what they say. Mm-hmm. They say having trouble understanding what's available to us, getting and keeping access. And of course, there's a competing challenge there, which is to make sure governance is in place, to make sure data is secure and private data is kept private. So it's not an easy thing to make access widely available, but also secure and safe. So there are some competing priorities there. But that's a good example of, I wouldn't want to really put someone through training if they're telling me I can't get access to the data I need. Well, then I think you're setting them up for failure by putting them through training until you've looked at closely. So those are some other traps I think we see people falling into. And it's easy to fall into those traps because the organizations are so complex and there's so many moving parts. We know data is in many different places. And so that creates some challenges, bringing things together and giving people what they need. So that's sort of putting the cart before the horse type. Pitfalls I mentioned. But how about you? Is there some other kind of common flaw you see? And I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I'm actually more curious sometimes.
No, it's fine. Well, I think one of the things that one of the maybe soapboxes I like to get on is that people, when they think of data literacy, in fact, I've been on a couple of podcasts recently, and people say, well, how do you define data literacy? And I just think, I don't know, I personally think that topic is kind of funny, in that as if there's just one definition for something as broad as data literacy across an entire enterprise where you have different roles and different personas in the organization. Marketing uses data a little bit differently than finance uses data, than maybe sales, than operations and manufacturing, insert functional area of the organization here. So there are broad definitions, of course, around data literacy, but they don't really mean a lot to me. I think it's more interesting to sort of dig into, okay, you're in marketing, now let's talk about what's data literacy mean to you? And, but there are broad stats, to your point though, around, data democratization. You hear about this, and I think it was in a study by Accenture that I believe the number was 75% of people have access to data now, because that movement has been afoot for a while now, but in the low 20s in terms of percent of people have the skills necessary to use it effectively. Right. And that's a big challenge when you're trying to get value out of that data. But, back to the sort of definition of data literacy, one of the things I think is most common that I see is that people say, when they think of data skills, they think of visualization. Like they immediately think of charts. And that's like the only thing. Yeah. It's either Excel or it's charts. Yeah. It's like these two things are the end all be all for data. But people don't realize, one of the things I find to be exceptionally true, and maybe a blind spot, if you will, for the corporations, is that people don't realize that most everyone creates data. And down to every single level in the organization, from beginner, very frontline kind of entry level people are creating a lot of the data of the organization that the organization could analyze if it were maybe higher quality data, if people realize their role in that kind of data quality lifecycle. Customer support reps, sales professionals are entering data into CRM. These types of things are critical for the organization to be able to analyze and figure out really what's going on, and how do they improve their effectiveness, how do they improve efficiency. But the data's bad, because of some of the skill gaps. And so back to personas though, what do you think, when you see some of the different personas across an organization, and some of the skills that are relevant in those personas, like how do you guys attack that when you go into organizations? Do you think about it sort of at the persona level or role level, or how do you guys approach that? Yeah,
I think you mentioned that it isn't one thing, data literacy. So coming up with a single definition and applying it to everyone uniformly doesn't make sense. Couldn't agree more. And the question always does come up, how do you define it? And to your point, I think more importantly, it's, well, how are we going to identify where people are, where they need to go relative to their ability to make effective use of data, right? And it does encompass so many things, charts, graphs, but not just those, one time we worked on sort of a Venn diagram, right? So graphicacy, the ability to use charts, and numeracy is really just numbers and understanding those concepts. It's also technical skills. It's also communication skills. There's also a domain acumen. Sometimes people say, business acumen, but really there are dialects, like you mentioned. Hey, I'm in marketing. Well, there are certain terminology and acronyms and metrics that you're going to more likely apply. So embracing that is multifaceted, that it's messy, and then we need to find a way to make sure people are getting assistance that is dialed into what it is that they actually do, as opposed to some kind of broad, applicable, hopefully, type of message that they have to then translate, almost like dialects, right? If it's a language,
right,
accents, there are dialects. You can understand them, but sometimes it requires a little bit of translation. So
do you guys see that in rollouts?
That's the way to start, right? Saying, oh, well, let's at least start. And so we were working with some organizations that are already down the road of defining who their personas are. And then we try to match them, and there are ways we can do that. For us, I mean, broadly speaking, you really have the person who interacts with data, but not raw data. They're consuming facts, figures, charts, and graphs that others have prepared for them. And then you kind of make this big leap into the world where you're rolling up your sleeves and working with the raw data yourself. And that used to be a very small subset of the organization back when I started my career in 2000. Now it's very much more broad. You're not just an analyst by title or in IT or an analytics team, although they obviously do that day in and day out, where you're seeing lots of other people in the business itself performing those sorts of functions on a fairly regular basis. But so you might want to break those two up. Are you really someone who's using raw data from time to time, someone who's using raw data each and every day? Okay, so maybe there's a difference there. And then there's the decision maker bracket. To me, that's oftentimes in the personas a separate type of person that is, in a way, a consumer. I don't like the word consumer. Usually we look at it like a reader or interpreter, but what they're doing is specifically trying to use it to make decisions. So I see that persona coming up a lot. For us in our training, we have courses that are dialed into different skill levels, and it's almost like a triangle where the more you work with data and the more sophisticated types things you're doing, you typically have fewer and fewer people in an organization the higher up you go. But then at the bottom of this triangle, although it's not top to bottom for any other reason other than just the number of people, it's a very broad section of individuals who are having to interact with data. I would make the point that it's pretty much everyone now, has to interact with data in some form. And so we need to teach them what is data, how does it apply to them. We need to teach them how to understand the concepts, the messages that are being told to them, reading charts and graphs. And then once you get to that next level, and I think it's very important that more and more people, as we continue to evolve as a species, not just as companies, we need to have more and more people comfortable with interacting with raw data, because then you're able to verify, is what someone's telling me true? Do I agree with it? Am I able to look at it from a different angle and now engage in the dialogue in a totally different way? So our hope is that we can continue to get people to go up that ladder, and to be able to dive into the data themselves.
Right.
But I do think typically today that is a different type of individual within companies, and I think it is important to at least identify where people are today in that spectrum.
Yeah,
so that's my point about it.
Yeah, I think one of the back to it being something that is pervasive and that we all need to continue increasing skill. It reminds me back in the maybe it was the early 90s when it just was no longer optional for people to learn how to use computers at work, and there were a fair number of people, quite a few, that came kicking and screaming, but it just became like, this is just how you work, and I feel like we're not. There's still a little bit of that movement to come here, but that's where I feel like we're headed, is that it's just not, it's just, this is how work will be done in the future. And you can't lack those skills, or it will dramatically affect your ability to progress in your career and to get any job. And because it's just, you have to have computer skills. Well, now you have to have data skills. And I agree, you're sort of going up that ladder. The way we think about it is, we start at the data citizen level, and we just believe we're all data citizens. So we all interact with data, and one of the areas that, in addition to some of the ones that you mentioned, around, yes, you have to be able to understand charts. You may not be creating them yet. Right. You need to be able to understand what a correlation means. You're maybe not correlating data yet, but what does it even mean for data variables to be correlated? What is it? Right. And then the other area that we think is really important when it comes to the data citizen level is understanding use cases.
Mhm.
And so, it goes back to learning by example. These are examples of data being used, and that starts giving you some context and, back to thinking about what's my role in the data quality lifecycle. Well, if I understand that this data from the CRM is going to be used for this type of analysis downstream, it already starts giving me, some pause when I'm creating that data and realizing, well, someone may actually be using this data someday, so I better pay attention to it.
Yeah, so in sharing success stories, I remember that in other culture change initiatives I've been a part of in my career, that oftentimes what they'll say is, okay, start with some quick wins and then make sure to broadcast those. And then you're sharing the success story. You're seeing that the individuals with it have helped the organization achieve the goals. You're even seeing perhaps that this results in career growth for them. And so people are realizing, oh, this is a valuable thing. I'm getting not just learning about how exactly that win happened and what data it involved. You're getting the message that this matters to the organization. So there's sort of a cultural benefit that this is tied to our organization's success. It's tied to individual success within the organization. This is something I want to be part of. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's maybe a good transition into, now how do you approach this? So when you think about the data skill gap, there's so many amazing studies. One of the ones that I just find almost unbelievable is from the World Economic Forum, where 54% of the global workforce needs significant upskilling to the tune of about 101 days average per person. In the world, and one of the top areas, obviously, no surprise, is data. And so it's just an unbelievable problem from a scale perspective. And so how does an enterprise even go about this? Like, how do you guys get started with a company that maybe they have that champion, but good Lord, this is a big problem. Like, what do they do?
It is a huge gap. It is the education gap of our era. I mean, we can talk about how we got here. I have my opinions about that, and I think the more important question is, where do we go from here? And that is to close the gap one person at a time. I don't think any one organization can come close to doing that. I think even these massive tech giants, it's going to take a lot of individuals, a lot of innovation. We have folks here in the group that are also involved in this exact same initiative. People like Valerie Logan at the Data Lodge, whose boot camps are all about helping organizations come to grips with, right? How do they start to move forward? It's going to take, it's all hands on deck. I mean, and not only that, it's a matter of urgency. I mean, look what happened last year. It isn't just about companies being more profitable. It is about us understanding our environment, the threats, the opportunities, what issues we need to address to keep our families healthy, to make sure our societies are thriving. We could go on all day. I mean, data is a matter of fixing global problems, fixing community problems, individuals' problems, and company problems. So where do we go from here? I mean, I feel like when we work with organizations, typically what we're trying to do first is probably run a pilot where we take our materials and we walk them through it with a team. And after we've spent some time with some of those champions we talked about, figuring out how to fine tune some things, figuring out how to change some wording or verbiage, figuring out how to perhaps customize some examples, and then rolling that out and evaluating it. And then hopefully into the place where we say, let's go, let's get this out there. Let's try to allow as many people as possible in the organization to have access to this now that we think it's set up for success,
Right.
And then being able to figure out how that fits best in their culture with the other constraints they have. There's a lot of questions about how does the training get sent out, which you and I have talked a lot about this year. How does it get packaged and shipped and delivered? And so those are some of the things we think about, but we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more we need to figure out and do about how to really move people forward. I feel confident that our training is helping a lot of people already, but there's so many more nuances we need to consider thinking about adding so many more departments to create dialect-specific materials for. And we can look at our roadmap, and it's almost daunting, really, to think about how much work we have in front of us to build out training content that's going to be helpful for as many people as possible. And then also making sure, this is an important point, right? Making sure it's not just available for people with money or who work for big companies that have money. So there's that question we're trying to do, and how do we make this available for individuals? How do we make this available for individuals who traditionally have not been able to access these types of materials, so that we don't create just another haves and have-nots scenario. I think that we've seen that that's an important thing for our society, that people at all backgrounds and levels of education and skill and socioeconomic status can learn how to get effective.
Absolutely.
I'm a passionate.
I know. Yeah, I know there are actually some. I was interacting with someone yesterday that is starting to build a data literacy program for K through 12. Which, has got to be where this starts. If this is one of the skills of the future, it can't be just us at QuantHub, you at dataliteracy.com. It can't just be us working in the corporate world. I mean, I think that's both of us obviously think that's an important aspect of it. But if it's truly going to be a transformation, it has to be in the educational process as well. Just like any subject that's currently taught, this needs to be one of them.
I think we need to increase the focus in K-12. I'm not an expert in K-12 education. I just had my kids go through, and my second son graduated this week, so I got to see, at least in this fairly, I think, highly ranked school system in the Bellevue area of Washington, what he learned and what he found out. But there's some I think of Kate Strachan and Jordan Morrow's book, Data Literacy for Kids, or there's a company out there called Tuva Labs, and they make a browser-based version of drag and drop visualization software to help science students and science teachers mostly, teaching data. Right. We just launched a new initiative called Data Literacy for Education. We haven't even announced it yet. We're so busy announcing our partnerships. We're getting caught up over here, right? No, and next week we'll put that out there. So that's basically it's a deal for any teacher, any student can at least get access to our programs at a discount. I think we're going to do some more things to prop up data training in K-12. Couldn't agree more. I think I've seen some cool things happening there. Those are easy to root for. You want to see kids and teachers get excited about data. It's a pretty good thing. And so, how are ways we all can volunteer some of our own time and energy, donate some of our own products and resources to help at that. I think that those are all going to be completely worthwhile. So
yeah, absolutely. So what so we're both focused on data literacy. We're both serving the enterprise, working with customers. So are we competitors? Are we partners? Like, what's going on? Why are we together?
I had a great chat. Valerie, she's in the audience there. We had a great chat before I left Tableau, and she was at Gartner at the time, and we were talking about different things. I hope that's okay that I'm saying that, Val. But we both agreed. We said, since the gap is so wide, I don't really see the need to think about competition. I don't. I mean, it's all hands on deck. Like I said, you can't fight for a slice of the pie if you think it's all hands on deck. That's not consistent. Here's the way I think of it. If I could line up down the street, I'm right here in Bellevue Way, right there. If I could line up down the street the people that needed my help, I wouldn't be able to scratch the surface. A fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent is who I think I could work with. So then, what am I supposed to do? So that in that sense, it's what we agree is an abundance mindset. So then it's the question is, okay, well, we each do slightly different things. Maybe some of the companies in the space, what are the ways it makes sense for us to tag team? What are the ways it makes sense for us to help organizations, not just in the way I can help them or the way you can help them, but maybe there's a way we can put 2 and 2 together, and maybe it'll add up to 5. That's not in our training, but yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I know we talked about early on is that, we don't view each other that way. And quite honestly, we have a little bit different takes on this. Right. And you guys have an incredible content. Mm-hmm. And for us, the part of the problem, what's interesting is what you were just saying about sort of stacking these people along the road and figuring out how in the world do we actually do this. A big part of our focus actually is on the scalability side of this. Mm-hmm. And so we're, this, we're a micro learning platform. We don't create learning content per se. We're a curation engine. And our goal is to break it down into 10-minute pieces And so it's actually, and then make sure that people have the content in front of them that's most relevant to them at all times. And so it's truly learning like we learn every day at work. We all learn every day and we do it efficiently. But then when we decide to learn, when we decide we need to learn something, we schedule time and go somewhere else and go learn it. And what we're trying to do, and I think this partnership is really exciting for us in that it gets us really partnered with just incredible learning content and insights and the right things people need to learn. And then our job is to make sure it's in front of people every day when they need it in consumable chunks, so that back to the scale problem, I just don't see any other way this is going to work. When we talk about that scale.
Yeah, I agree. We looked at the scale question at the beginning of 2020, which we had more time to work on these on-demand courses than I planned on having for 2020. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't go anywhere. We just sat around writing books and making courses. But the idea was, let's make them on demand, right? And then let's make it so that as many people as possible can access that. Maybe we send the SCORM files for their own learning management system, or LMS. That's a technical term some in the room, I'm sure, are all too familiar with, and others don't. But those are some things we looked at and said, okay, let's try to do this. Now, what's interesting is, and so then you came along and we started talking and we said, oh my God, yeah. I mean, have I ever talked to someone that said, you know what? I don't want bite size. I want the whole thing like in one big bite. No one ever said that ever, right? Or, no, we don't really want to personalize it. Why would we personalize it? Let's just give them all the same thing. So, I mean, there's efficiencies you can get to roll it out that way. And sometimes it might work. And also sometimes live might work. We've had organizations say, we really need somebody here. That's just the way we, and even some that have, we're really are looking forward to getting back to in-person. So we're trying to meet all those modalities. It is, again, daunting to try to figure out how to do all those well, to meet people where they are. But when we heard about the way your technology works, we said, yeah, that is a winning idea. We've talked to a lot of people. We're having people come to us, say, can we get this in dripped content? And so we were having that, and we're trying to solve that. How do we do that? Well, now we have an easy solution. We just put that into the QuantHub engine, and it sends it to people where they are, like you said, right? Interstitial learning, where I'm learning it when it's also part of what I'm doing. Our big belief is that we need to tie the learning as closely as we can to what they're doing. So our exercises, our projects, our conversations in live sessions involve triggering them to go apply it. So I think that that's also an important part of the interstitial piece, is how can we then in that moment see, because if, like you said, if I'm learning how do I do k-means clustering? Why? Because someone told me it might help me think about ways to segment my customers. Okay, I'll look it up. I'm reading the blog post, I'm reading the tutorial, I'm watching the YouTube video, and then what am I doing? Well, I'm applying it to that data set I've got. Hopefully right then and right there. That's when you know it, you learn it, and it sticks. So then, how can also this content we're giving them trigger them to apply it right away, instead of having to remember it a week or 2 or 3 or 5 months later, when they may not be very likely to do that,
Well, I think if you don't apply, there's plenty of learning science that if you don't actually apply the skills you've learned right away, you forget it. So the forgetting curve is dramatic right after you learn something. And so that's why, with our approach and with your content, we're getting those topics back in front of people right after they learn them, because that is the key, the number one key to making sure that you actually can recall that information sometime in the future when you need it. Which it doesn't do you a lot of good to cram for a test and ace the test and then forget everything. Not that that's ever happened to any of us in school, but that doesn't do you a lot of good.
That's how I got through engineering school, was oh my gosh, did I remember it 2 days later? I don't think I remembered anything 2 days later.
So we're not going to do any engineering quizzes then right here. Then.
No, okay.
We already know your crowdcast literacy is suspect, so let's jump to a question from the audience. We have a question from Juan, who asked if we see a clear line between data literacy and analytics literacy, skills for handling data to deliver insights and actionable information for risk-informed decisions, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that one, Ben?
So to me, analytics is, I would say, like the middle. If you want to simplify it to being a triangle, You've got the consumer piece, the citizen piece you talked about, reading and understanding, charts, facts, figures, concepts, and then you jump this gap at some point in your career, and you're now analyzing data yourself. That's a data analysis layer, and then you can then bleed up higher into a analytics, more advanced analytics layer, where you're using some different kinds of advanced analytics. I mean, different people probably define what advanced means differently, but I think of that as you're going beyond descriptive statistics, and you're going beyond even like inferential stats and samples and things like that. And you're getting into some data mining algorithms, you're getting into some forecasting, you're getting into some modeling. I think that it goes higher than, again, if you're to take this middle layer of people working with data, it goes even a little higher, and maybe even at the top, you then call that person a data scientist. And of course, there's a wide range of skills and abilities connected to people who call themselves that. But I think of it as these are people that are turning algorithms loose on massive data sets to automate insights, to find patterns and trends in a more algorithmic way than an ad hoc way. So I guess that's a long answer. I'm just kind of thinking about those topics and how they compare.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a spectrum, right?
Analytics literacy. It's
it's a spectrum. I think one of the things that it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where you talk about use cases, even at the data citizen level, where we're all data citizens. It is useful for us to understand these use cases, and these use cases are analytics use cases. I may not be able to even fathom how people do that work, but it's good for me to know about it. And so just having the context of how this data may be used can be really valuable. And we think about like if people in the audience are familiar with like the Bloom's taxonomy. The first level of Bloom's taxonomy is understanding and being able to just talk about terminology.
What does it mean?
And it's not about being able to do it or even adapt it at kind of the highest level of that taxonomy. It's just terminology. Do I even understand what those things are? And so that's where I think that spectrum. It is a spectrum in terms of being able to do analytics, but starting to understand use cases for it, I think, is important even. At the data citizen level across an entire enterprise, because that's what gets us starting to realize how this all comes together. And that context starts having people yearn for those skills, right? Then they start actually wanting those skills. Because learning oftentimes is kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing, right? Training, it's off kind of on an island over somewhere, and it's hard to get people to engage with it. But if they start seeing how it actually plays out and how it can be used, then it starts driving engagement in learning, right?
Yep, totally. I mean, if I can know what like you mentioned, a regression is, and someone helps me understand why I might use that, how does it apply, things I want to watch out for when someone talks about it, then at some point in time, it's going to be natural to say, wait a second, I remember that we were talking about a regression, and it sounds like this is probably the case, and then you're suggesting it. Can someone please bring some regression insights to us? And then the next step is, well, that person's not available. Okay, well, I'll do it myself. I want to learn how to do it myself. So it's that it's that spectrum, it's that maturity, gradually evolving into the place where you don't just understand the concepts, you're competent to carry them out yourselves. And then, like I said, maybe at some point challenge them and develop new methods and approaches, because we need that. We haven't completed as a species the types of approaches we need to use in order to make effective use of data. So who is going to push that envelope? Who's going to identify new ways for all of us? We've got a long way to go too in what we actually do with data. And maybe you say, oh, that's for the academics, that's for the researchers. I think practitioners are fairly engaged in identifying innovative ways. Look at Cowell, look at people that are competing in contests, or sometimes it can be difficult, right? Because some of those insights might be within the four walls of a company and part of their IP or what have you. But the open source movement has led to a lot of innovation being shared. And so I love that, that we feel like, I can learn a lot of things from others and what they're doing, how they're applying even known technologies and innovative kind of scenarios and ways. So it's a fun space to be in. Think about how much has happened just in the last decade or two. I mean, just amazing strides in data.
It is a blast.
And actually amazing. Some people think that's incredibly intimidating and scary.
Well, I do think there's an aspect of that. Yeah,
absolutely.
One question actually, and you come from, you were at Tableau, and you come from a background in a kind of platform specific company. One of the questions, the other question from Abhijit is, how do you help customers understand that data literacy is tool agnostic? In my experience, I've seen clients look at it as come and deliver a specialized training program as per their needs. Really specifically tailored to that specific tool. What are your thoughts on that sort of tool specific world versus tool agnostic?
So we could make a lot more money here at our company by doing nothing but tool specific training. And so we decided not to do that because there's a lot of that, and it's great. The tool companies themselves do a great job at providing. In fact, I was involved with a lot of those tutorials and videos at Tableau, and I traveled around the country and trained journalists mostly about how to use Tableau, university students like Stanford or UT in Austin. So I was involved with teaching people how to use Tableau. I still am. I teach at the University of Washington. We just wrapped up on Tuesday, our last class, and they were presenting amazing work, So at some point in time, we need to do things. We need to use tools. And so then they need to learn how to use those tools. But what I found was that Tableau is missing is the tool agnostic piece. What are the concepts? How do they cross tools? And also this important piece where I explain to people that some of these tools with different names are doing very similar things. Okay, and then understanding how those features are related to essentially leverage data, combine tables, pivot tables, conduct analysis on those data tables in pretty much just using a different skin. Okay, and then when you start to connect those dots, they love it. They're like, wait a minute, a join is like a more sophisticated version of VLOOKUP. Oh, that's awesome. And wait a second, so let's call something a little different in this tool versus that tool. That is building bridges across these different isolated things they have heard about or they know. When you build the bridge, it's like in the brain, you're linking together two lonely pieces of information. It really solidifies your learning and your understanding. And I realized while I was working at Tableau that the tool companies were never going to do that. What's the benefit for them to say, oh, here's how ours is sort of like our competitor's feature? I realized that was going to be something that they'd be very reticent to do, but it was so important and so needed. So I guess I'm very passionate about that question, so I'll stop there. But my thought is, all the tool training is amazing and people need it and they need to learn it. And I'm not that person right now. I'm the person that's going to say, let's talk about the concepts and ideas. Let's learn how to apply them to a variety of tools. So I'm not going to be a partner of this or that, or I'm just trying to say, what are the most important concepts? You need to learn how to prepare data for analysis. Let's talk about a handful of tools that do that. And let's show you how to use them. Not just talk about them, let's roll up our sleeves and use them. And then let's talk about how let's use SQL. Oh, okay, this join statement, see what that's doing over here in this tool? It's just doing that. It's just doing that in the background. Oh, and then they're like, that's interesting. And now they feel so much more empowered because they see the bigger picture and they see the connections. So
absolutely. I think one of the things that we've started doing is I do think showing some of these concepts through tools, but focusing on the concepts can be valuable because it makes it very, it gives you that kind of context of doing it in a real world type of environment. So we just recently partnered with Zach and Juice Analytics.
Oh yeah,
I think Zach's in Nashville. Yeah, you know Zach, and I think that's sort of a content partnership as well. Zach's really strong in visualization, storytelling, and so I
was playing with this juice box tool they made. It's really neat. I love it.
Exactly.
Web-based story builder. It's neat. It's really cool.
And so that's an example where we're trying to show some of that content. But it's not about learning the tool, it's about learning the concepts. And showing it through a tool is fine, but it's the concepts that are the concepts are what apply across tools, right? So if you go from company to company, or even in companies, most haven't standardized on one specific tool.
Right,
So
right.
you're better off understanding the concepts.
You go to a massive, large, say, Fortune 500 company, they got a lot of tools. That was the other reason why I felt it was important to do this, because they've got a lot of tools. They've got Power BI and Tableau, and some people are still just trying to use Excel, and some people are using R or Python to do some of the similar kinds of things. So, well, if their toolkit is so diverse, does it help them if they just have an amazing training program for that one tool? Well, yeah, they can leverage that tool better, but then how are we now providing the cross-tool content and training?
Yep.
And that's an important question. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we could talk all day about this topic, and so Ben, it's been great. It's been great connecting with you over the past year. It's good to make new friends in COVID.
I know, right?
I seem to have not spent any time with any normal friends, so it's great to make new friends in the COVID time, and we're super ecstatic to be partners with you guys and think together. We can. This is a daunting problem, like you said, and we think together we can really at scale start making a big difference in this skill gap that is kind of the skill gap of our age, like you said.
Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, likewise, Matt, and the other members on your team who have helped us line things up and get things going and figure it all out. Nathan, who plugged everything in the back to make sure our content fit in with your engine, and Heather, who's helping make it work for the customer. I think she may be on the chat over there. But yeah, it's been a fun thing. People, and I love working with others in this space who are so passionate about the same thing. And we've got a long way to go, and we're just going to keep chipping away at it here together. But yeah, it's a pleasure, and obviously, apologies for the audio snafu. My audio improve, but yeah, sorry. Glad we figured it out finally, and we're able to salvage this session. But to the folks that have joined in and chatted and asked questions and all that makes it a lot more fun for us to engage with you all too. So that's been a pleasure to hear some of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ben, have a good day, and everyone, thanks for joining. This will be recorded and available, and we'll make it available if for people that weren't able to join but registered. And thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.